IVM.
Devi or Sajjano, both of us, if you hear a sniffle, if you hear a cough while this episode is being recorded, because both your hosts are like, what the fuck is this weather? But nevertheless, what's up?
What's going on, man? Apart from my, nosy, I am happy to report that I had a very successful trip to Jaipur. For those of you who don't know, I am a Jaipur Lit Fest stan. So I think it was my 11th year going for JLF, and it was so much fun. Have you ever been?
No, never been.
What? Oh my God, it's amazing. It's so much fun. The energy is incredible. It was packed to the rafters, as one, would imagine. But kick-ass authors, man. There was Siddhartha Mukherjee, one of my favorite authors who wrote The Gene. And he has this new book out called The Song of the Cell. Then I stumbled upon this incredible philosopher whose name is Amiya Srinivasan. And just the most brilliant session on the future of, not the future, but modern day feminism and evolving conversations around all things, feminist movement. So just lots of really, really good sessions. And I love Jaipur. So it was good to take a quick 2-day peace out to the Pink City and see all that JLF and JEPS has to offer. How was your weekend? Anything interesting?
I watched Last of Us finally, and I'm so happy that I saw it. It was a fabulous show. Also started watching White Lotus. Plus, most importantly, I have booked advance tickets for Pathaan. Yes.
Oh my God. I am not surprised. What makes you excited about Pathaan? Pray tell. Shah Rukh Khan's abs.
No. Actually,
Then?
Salman Khan's guest appearance. Tiger all is ready. Yeah.
Shut up. Wow.
It's going to be YRF Spy Universe where Hrithik Roshan's Kabir from War, Salman's Tiger, and this Pathaan are all going to be... They actually now have a logo thing at the beginning that says YRF Spy Universe. I'm like, yeah, I'm down for this multiverse with Bhai.
Oh my God. This is basically, you only said this is going to become his a Mission Impossible thingamajig proposition.
Yes. But what else has been up? As Jalasmi has very nicely left in our notes, Anand Ambani and Radhika Merchant got engaged. Sagai ho gayi. But the most interesting part of that entire thing was to watch John Abraham walk in wearing jeans, a white t-shirt and a jacket saying, I don't give a flying fuck, which was the most interesting thing to see.
Which was great. I mean, that's what you'd hope, someone's approach to the general, ostentatious nature of all things Ambani is like. I don't know if you saw the family dancing. It was... I
saw.
Yeah.
Sweet, it was sweet. Okay. Very cute.
Okay. Sweet, cute.
Which family dance is well choreographed? Let's be honest.
That's why families shouldn't do dances. Did your parents dance at your wedding?
They did. To some extent.
Okay, mine were banned. No one was allowed to put up any performances. They're boring AF. But in any case, before we digress into Anand Ambani and Radhika Merchant Ka Milan, I don't know if you saw this. Obviously, you saw this because we just discussed it. But ITC has plans to acquire D2C health food brand called Yoga Bar. What is your take on this? Is this just consolidation as one would expect, or something interesting happening here?
I think it's ITC has always had a very strong food focus. Look at some of the food category pieces they have. This kind of fits into that mix. So I think from an ITC standpoint, this I think totally makes sense. Yoga Bar is interesting. I mean, I had a chat with one of the co-founders sometime, I would say early 2022. And I remember she was talking about how they were literally focusing on their own manufacturing, and they kind of scaled up to really go into very specific categories across the board, and not just the nutrition bars, but really go deep into cereal and kid and women focused products. So it's an interesting one for ITC. And kind of maybe makes sense for Yoga Bar, but I don't know how the cultures will match though, because ITC is very, very old school culture, as most of the larger FMCG brands are. So it'll be interesting to see how this works together. But I think it's a good one for ITC to have bought.
Yeah. Why do you say that though? What do you think in their portfolio is missing, number one? And number two, what's the space that you see Yoga Bar applying? So I think one interesting thing that Yoga Bar has done is just the amount it has penetrated with respect to retail. So apparently it's available in some 6,000 outlets. So for example, the one good thing about this acquisition is it's not like ITC needs to build up distribution ground up for Yoga Bar. You know what I mean? As would be the case for other kinds of acquisition in all things consumer brands. These guys seem to be pretty nicely set. So what do you think is the consumer sentiment that they're, doubling down on? Or, you know what I mean? What's the consumer need that they're doubling down on? Like a Kit Kat competitor?
I'm just looking at the statement from ITC, right? They have this strategy called the ITC Next strategy, where they're getting like future ready brands. And but the basic point is, you look at most ITC brands, you don't really, I mean, apart from maybe the bingo category, which kind of came in at certain point of time, you don't associate it with like future-esque or like new age products. So it could be an interesting way for them to do this. And that's what a lot of brands have done, right? A lot of your larger conglomerates getting like really like young, fresh. Exactly. This is one of those strategies, I feel. For a yoga bar, I feel it just kind of helps give them stability. They can scale up and kind of grow. Gives the founders a way to kind of exit over time.
Yes, queen. Yes, queen. And on to the next generation of HomePod delivers rich, deep bass, natural, mid-range and clear, detailed highlights, all while using Siri to help with everyday tasks. This is a piece of news that I have no shits to give about. But what is this HomePod? This is like their Google Alexa ka judwa bhai.
Yeah, so it's interesting that they launched the HomePod many years ago. This is a huge speaker where you actually can put two and it doubles up like a stereo piece for your TV. They discontinued it, interestingly, and launched a HomePod Mini, which is a smaller speaker. I actually have one of those, which is nice. It's convenient to have if you have an iPhone. But the news is actually not this, is that while the HomePod's been brought back and everybody was surprised it came back, there's leaked information that Apple might finally be launching one of those home hubs where you can control all the devices in your home. And this could be a part of that strategy. It's weird they launched this before. And and they didn't do an event. They just launched a bunch of these. They launched the new MacBook Pros and the Mac Mini and the HomePod just like randomly online. So it's an interesting, I don't know why they just launched it this way, but if rumors have it, the hub is coming. They're trying to go after the home a little more seriously. But for that, Siri has to remove like crazy. Like Siri is just terrible. So let's be honest.
Not that I use any of these because I'm a new entrant into the world of all things Apple. But in slightly sad news, and obviously Varun's going to be giving the gyan this episode because I've had way too much work this week. Layoffs are like all the rage, man. Everyone from Swiggy to Alphabet, cutting people left, right and center. What do you make of this? Is this just like, do you think companies are using, quote unquote recession, which still doesn't seem to have hit as, drastically as we all expected it to just get rid of the fat? Do you think that's what's happening over here? And I feel bad about referring to people as fat, but you get the gist.
No, I get it. And the thing is that what ends up happening is that you overhire during a period of growth, which is what everybody did in 2020, 2021. Yeah. And this is them doing that. But I also feel what's happening is because you're in a market which, while it's not recession-esque yet, everyone's trying to be safer. So everyone's cutting off pieces which they believe aren't necessarily huge growth for the future. So, and if you look at this, they've actually cutting off a big part of Instamart to reduce cash burn. So that's actually been the interesting one, is that's actually the area that they're, and they're also seeing, product engineering operation plus Instamart. So yeah, it's across the board, but it's interesting that, again, our favorite quick commerce seems to be the focus. But again, they're all cutting burn in the chance because they're all foreseeing that it's going to be a downturn. They're doing that. The Alphabet one, however, is slightly different. We're going to dig into that deeper toward the later part of the show, but Alphabet seems to be looking at kind of aligning focus towards a few areas and not because, and Alphabet's been known for this, right? They've done they have 50,000 projects going on. Some of them like the Loon project, etc., were like the most bizarrely interesting ones. So I think they're refocusing, and because of that's been happening again, like lots of stories online of people who just woke up to an email and loss of access. People who worked for the company for 12, 15 years have lost their jobs. So it is sad to see, but that's where the world is right now, where everyone's kind of cutting costs wherever they can and really refocusing on being more conservative.
So let me ask you this, right? Which company would have to cut what team for you to be like, holy shit, things are getting real? You know what I mean? Because all these other things seem to be very small, impacting, very, sideline functions. You know what I mean? Like there's been no major COVID type layoff. If
Apple or Amazon starts laying off people in their video divisions, that would be a very interesting signal. And I picked those because they're one of those which they don't necessarily need, but it's one of those things they glamorize. They have that thing on top. If they start cutting there, because everybody knows that's an area they can cut, then that there is a deep-rooted issue there. Because all these other layoffs are a lot more. You're just trimming parts of departments. You're taking off projects. But if these are very because these are projects which have a lot of limelight on them, and if you start trimming teams over there, that's when you got to look at it. I just feel it's a signal if that happens. It hasn't happened yet, although in most of these places they've stopped hiring. So that's a signal, not hiring as extensively as before. But the only other piece I can think of, and I think that it's already the media side is also seeing the brunt. There's been news of how a large amount of the media networks across the US, even from Vox Media to I think the New Yorker, everybody else is also kind of let go of a large chunk of their teams. So it's happening across the board. It's a continued, I feel like a news thread of people being laid off.
Okay, moving on to the next. PhonePe raises $350 million from General Atlantic at a valuation of $12 billion.
Good on them, man. I find PhonePe's story to be so interesting, to be a company that was acquired and then now having to become is too
independent
big to
again.
Yeah, and to be able to do this, it's good on them because it's a great product. Seem to be going in the right direction. I'm a user, so I've always been like, okay, happy to see them do well. But what are your thoughts on this?
What are my thoughts on this? Same as you, man. I think, two things. One, given that it's become a part of the holding company of Flipkart, the strategy is playing out well, right? Because then the value of the holding company continues to increase because each of its parts is worth all that much. Do you know what I mean? Like if Flipkart right now is in that general territory of 50 billion plus, now you've got PhonePe, which is at 12 billion plus. If as a sum of parts, each of these is playing out fairly well. Think of it as, imagine if like Google had to spin off YouTube, right? Or if Amazon spun out a couple of its core sort of
AWS then.
Exactly, AWS plus. Or if Facebook, bro, like Meta number one, if they spun off Instagram, WhatsApp into, different sort of like buckets, which obviously in Meta's case makes no sense. But I think strategically, this stacks up fairly well in favor of FK's holding company. But let's go to slightly sad news, bro. OpenAI reportedly relied on low-paid Kenyan laborers to sift through horrific content to make ChatGPT palatable. This was expected, no? I mean, how did no one see this come? Like, why is this news? I mean, I'm glad it's news, but you know what I mean? Like, why is it news?
So this actually happens a lot, right? It's always that when you have global tech companies, and actually global companies in general, there's this entire chain of the company will outsource to someone, they will subcontract to someone else, who will subcontract to someone else. And that generally ends up in an exploitative state. It's happened. I mean, we've seen that happen with Meta in the past. It's happening with OpenAI. So I don't think it's surprising. It's just sad that it's not surprising, is the way I like to put it. But yeah, it's just one of those things that as much as you want to say that tech companies are taking the world in a certain direction, at some point at the back end of things, they're also making the worst part worse.
Yeah, hundo. Guess who's getting slightly poorer? In an SEC filing, Apple announced that...
Thoda, little bit.
Apple announced that Mr. Tim Cook will receive a big pay cut in 2023, and the filing noted that he requested the cut. Mr. Cook's 2023 target total compensation is only a meager $49 million. Guys. Dollars. A reduction, by the way, of over 40% from his 2022 target total compensation.
Bus?
What is going on?
Discount store jana padega.
How many zeros are there in 49 million?
I'm not even counting.
Auqaat ke bahar number of zeros.
Yes, too much. But on the other front, activist investor Elliott Management Corp has made a multi-million-dollar investment in cloud-based software firm Salesforce.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because Elliott Management, as we were discussing before we got into recording the episode, have a history of kind of getting into companies, cutting costs to increase shareholder value. It's kind of shaking things up. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Mark Benioff, who pretty much like has run Salesforce like however he wanted to for a long time, and has also, by the way, been unable to find a successor for the longest time. Everybody he picks eventually leaves because he never hands it over.
Sounds like Bob Iger.
Sounds like Bob Iger. I agree. But that's every CEO. They don't want to leave it, and when they leave it, they miss it too much. Is the way I've seen it. So, but yeah, so that is what's happening. So it'll be interesting to see how Salesforce reacts. Plus, activist investors are also people who make sure changes like CEOs changing when they have to, they make that happen. So that could be something they push for as well. So you got to watch that. One of the most bizarre stories of the recent times, JP Morgan Chase is suing an entrepreneur and former CEO for allegedly fabricating data to con investors into buying her education startup. I don't know if you read this article.
This was wild. I know you gave me the TLDR, but I have definitely been seeing the memes of how apparently everyone who's on the cover of Forbes 30 under 30 finds
Yes.
themselves in this peculiar spot of being fraudsters. Not everyone, but a lot of people.
So she basically made JP Morgan buy her startup called Frank for $175 million. And, 5 years after she founded the company, basically the company helps students apply for financial aid in college is what the company does. And once they bought it, they started to access that 4 million customers who were part of the database. And they realized that most of the times they were sending out like tests, etc. to those customers, and they just kept getting like, we're not interested kind of responses. Until they realized that of those people, there is 4.26 million are fake customer accounts that she got by paying a New York-based data scientist $18,000. So she gave $18,000, got 4 million fake accounts, and made $175 million. She and her growth officer, whose name is Olivier Amar.
How do you know he's Indian, by the way? Maybe it's like Amar. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's like an exotic Amar.
I just assumed it was Amar. Olivier Amar. Olivier Amar, and this founder's name is Charlie Javis. So now obviously they're suing her, trying to get the money back. But legend, 18,000 DK. Maybe a little too much legend, but it's nuts.
Yeah. And last two fun pieces of news for the week. First off, Trump looks to ditch his own social media site. So Trump obviously was like the star of this Twitter competitor called Truth Social. And man has decided to not extend his contract beyond 2023. And he's apparently been asking people what his first post on Twitter should be, which will be fun. Are you excited to see Trumpy Wumpy back on the bird?
Aren't you bored of Trump now? Is my only point. He's saying he will run again in the US. But I feel
there's no chance that's happening.
He's trying to. He has support. And also some of the people,
Dude, no candidate he backed has made a mark. Like everyone who he backed in the midterms or whatever is like lying dead at the end of a well. At least that's whatever I remember from my New York Times reading.
What's also happening is there seems to be still a fair chunk of people who are supporting him. But we shall see. There's some who will be... Biden's running again, right? If I know. I haven't followed my American news in a while. So.
Unless he dies before the next election, which
He's
is
too
also
old. Yeah,
possible.
they should have somebody else run. I have feeling somebody else will end up getting the ticket for the Democrats as well. Biden's very old.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, by the way, I realized something, which is the fact that I have, for the longest time, I always felt like I knew US politics. I have just stopped following US politics, and I feel like I didn't miss anything because it's not my country. Why the fuck am I watching US politics?
Yeah, but US politics is fun. You know what I mean? It's like watching like a dramedy. But
I watch Desi politics now.
Oh God, Mr. Rahul Gandhi with his beard. But let's not go there before our show gets cancelled. Finally, Zomato fraud. Customer reveals shocking cash on delivery scam. CEO vows to plug the loopholes. And ladies and gents, basically the scam is pretty simple. A few Zomato riders have apparently been pretending to deliver, actually have been delivering food to customers, but basically making like a false allegation at their back end saying that the customer wasn't answering their phone or the order was cancelled, which essentially enables, the customer to get, in the words of this article on Mashable.com, 1,000 rupees ka khana 200-300 mein, while that kickback of 200-300 goes directly into the pockets of the riders. Expected, dude. I mean, when you're dealing with, 30,000-40,000 riders, ऐसी चीजें, what's that line? बड़े बड़े शहरों में छोटी छोटी चीजें. You will know this, Varun. Come on. From, what is that movie? The Shah Rukh Khan movie. तुझे देखा तो ये जाना सनम. What is that movie? Sanam. Oh my God. What is that movie? DDLJ. Yeah, what is that line from that movie, dude? बड़े बड़े शहरों में
बड़े देशों में छोटी-छोटी बातें होती रहती है.
There you go. And the Desh in this case being Zomato. But enough with my Hindi muhavras. What are we going to be talking about this very short episode?
Yes, it's not short at all, considering our introduction has gone on for so long. But the Netflix, the Netflix founder, Reed Hastings, steps down, moves from being co-CEO to chairman. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also talking about Blue Tokai raising $30 million in their Series B. Plus, we're talking about the GoMechanics layoffs and that amazing LinkedIn post that was put up. And closing it off with something interesting happening at Google because of ChatGPT and OpenAI. So all of that. But before all of that, we shall take a break. Be right back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where Reed Hastings has decided to Netflix and chill now, because till now he was only Netflixing and had no chill. That joke is over. Nobody laughed. Let's move on to the points.
Congratulations on acknowledging your car crashing joke.
Yes. But what do you think about this? Reed Hastings, obviously legend for having started Netflix from like a DVD rental service to, streaming, to kind of come in at a point of time. And it is crazy if you think about it. Netflix was not a traditional media company, has grew to be the market leader in streaming globally.
Yeah.
You got to give it to him. I mean, you're kind of going out at a point of time and you've kind of done that. Obviously, they have a lot of problems, a lot of stuff to deal with. Growth has kind of stagnated a bit. They're having to start ad supported, which he famously said he would never do, and a lot of that stuff. But I guess this was kind of going to happen. It was expected at some point of time.
I think one is that. Second is, you after a point kind of need like a mindset change, so, and I think this duopoly of this Ted gentleman and the other guy. So basically Ted obviously is the Ted Sarandos, is the sort of, programming brain. He's a creative guy, sort of genius at Netflix. And then you've got Greg Peters, who's seems to be a very good counterbalance on the business front, right? Like he's the one who pushed for ad-supported tiers. He's been the one who's, helmed the charge of all things gaming. So it seems, and it's not like he's stepping, it's not like, Reed Hastings is checking out of Netflix or leaving Netflix to start something else. It seems like he's at a point in his Netflix journey where he needs to almost have a bird's eye view of both these functions, all things creative and all things business, and how both of them come together to drive long-term results for Netflix. And I think, I don't know about you, man, but I think sometimes stepping away from the daily cacophony of it all actually helps in bring clarity in terms of, how, where, when to run things. And Ted Sarandos has a very formidable co-CEO and partner in the form of Greg Peters.
Yeah. And I feel what also would have led to this was that, and he spoke about this, is that this is a transition waiting to happen, because at some point, when he even made Ted Sarandos co-CEO, it was almost like a signal that this was bound to happen sooner rather than later. What I find interesting though is that he made both of them co-CEOs. Like he didn't just make Ted Sarandos CEO and Greg Peters COO, but I guess might be a way of functioning that they're trying to drive. Netflix has always been interesting about how they want things to function. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if this changes anything, because it's not like he's going away. He's going to be executive chairman, but we don't know if he's going to be executive chairman like Chiragdin uncle, or is he going to be an executive chairman of another kind. But it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, like total credit where it's due for having built what he's built. I mean, just think about it. We didn't have streaming when Netflix started off, and look at where we are right now.
I don't know, man. My one pushback on that, why I have two co-CEOs piece, it's not even a pushback, it's just like a way of thinking, is for a company like Netflix to succeed, right? What do they need? They need one incredible creative culture and talent, because if you don't have that, then your company is not going anywhere, right? For example, like how Amazon needs operational and financial excellence, because literally every 1% difference is a bottom line impact of, tens of billions of dollars in some cases. In Netflix, them being a part of the cultural conversations is their ultimate cachet. And that's what, Ted Sarandos owns. And I think the thing that at least I've seen is people who are very strong creatively usually aren't the best ops people, so that counterbalance is needed, and it's very, very, very rare. Maybe Reed Hastings was one of the few people who got this. He was one of the few people who could strike a balance in between being incredibly creative and understanding the creative process, but also backing it up with, business acumen. Like the only counterpart to Reed Hastings that I can think of, though obviously he's, a decade his senior, is Bob Iger. Yeah. It's just very difficult to find that killer blend of ops excellence and creative. And maybe that's why Disney's never been able to, hand the reins off to anyone else, because you're kind of expecting the next person to be like even the Bob Chapek chap who was fired. His DNA is operational excellence, right? He's not a creative guy at all. So I wonder if he had a nice counterbalance with someone who, you know what I mean? Like got that landscape, knew how to deal with artists, if the story would have unfolded differently.
But that's why you have a COO, right? If you look at a lot of I think creative companies, the creative person always has to be CEO. As in not creative person, the slightly creative bent person should be the CEO, and the COO drives the operations. And I feel that's always been a good way to counterbalance that, and also make sure that I don't think it's one reporting into the other, but it's more like make them function that way. I guess making them co-CEOs gives that same kind of like a thought process by just naming it that way. But I do believe that it has to be, and that was a big thing, right? If you look at Bob Chapek, you got an operational guy, make him CEO. And I also feel Bob Chapek had from the beginning, people kind of saw that he had the wrong kind of temperament for the job because he didn't value the creatives, and you can't be Disney and not value creatives. And I think that was like bound to happen sooner than later. But then I think what Bob Chapek needs to do is sit with Reese Hastings and have a cup of blue Tokai coffee because they just raised $30 million.
Nice segue, Congos. This is great, dude. I was very, very, very happy to read this piece of news. I mean, I've literally, it's like I'm like one of those aunties in like weddings. मैं आपको जानती थी जब आप इतने छोटे थे. So fun fact, but like Blue Tokai actually, both Matt and Namrata, they came to our very first LBB office in Jangpura. And they literally came when they were just starting out when I think when they moved back from the US. And they walked into, our office, climbed up the small stairs, and we had this long conversation about all things coffee. And, they spoke to me about like the third wave of coffee in the US and craft coffee and this, that, and the other. And to see how far they've come, you just feel really proud. You know what I mean? You're just like, dude, you deserve to win.
Yeah. Also, when you look at a company that's been grown and built the right way, you never heard anything like random about how they've done things. They've built it like a legit business. And those are the kind of companies you want to see succeed. Because I think you have too many examples of startups that are just burning cash and doing all kinds of stupid shit to grow. But when you look at a good, stable business grown the right way, and also going globally, not just in India. And I feel that's exactly. So good on them. It's also an interesting time for the coffee market, right? I mean, there's been a lot of talk around coffee in India. You're looking at, obviously, third wave being the VC and startup hub that it is. And then you have everybody from your Slay Coffee, Rage Coffee, etc. Sleepy Owl is an interesting one just for the space that they're taking for the non-enthusiast coffee drinkers.
I think Rage is an even better example.
Yeah. Just for the adrenaline pushing coffee drinker. For all the rage.
No, but very distribution first. You know what I mean? Like none of these guys have qualms about, dude, we need to like Blue Tokai for that matter. They haven't done anything fancy schmancy. They haven't, put themselves on this list, that list or the cover of any magazine. They've quietly focused on building distribution first, which is, going all in on their retail outlets, ensuring kick-ass expansion. I love what they've done through their partnerships with brands like Bahari Sons and, other bookstores. I think Bahari Sons is now their core partner, where they've launched in markets like Calcutta in partnership with, a few of their key sort of like anchor brands who've obviously they've, may have networked with and grown up with in the Delhi context. So to me, the real winner over here is distribution wins. And you see that in the Yoga Bar story, you see that in the Blue Tokai story. But brands that really think about where their consumer is and how their product will be bought, those guys seem to be guarding their jhanda in the ground.
Totally. And also if you look at it, none of the international chains, apart from maybe a Starbucks, also because of the Tata tie-up, have done well in the coffee context. You would have expected some of the bigger ones from abroad to kind of come in and set it up. But it's good to see homegrown, coffee brands really understanding the Indian consumer and in such different ways and building for them. And I've never come across, no coffee startup calls themselves a D2C, right? They all stay away from that tag. I don't know if maybe a Rage called themselves that. So they're staying away from tags. They're like, we're building a business like a business has to be built.
But let me ask you this. Do you think Blue Tokai benefited from Starbucks' growth and expansion? Because I feel like you always need, like I'm reading this really interesting book right now called Hitmakers. And Hitmakers talks about how, hits, the one big thing that takes just another song or just another, ad campaign from could have been cool to a viral hit, a quote unquote viral hit, is just finding the right anchors of distribution. You know what I mean? That there always has to be one guy who comes in and makes something big and then everyone piles on, kind of like to not give them credit where it's due. But like what Third Wave did with Blue Tokai, right? You had someone to come and build the market and then, you piled on and you obviously benefited from the ripple effect. Do you think that's what happened in this case?
I feel Blue Tokai still, it holds that thin line between not being as mainstream as Starbucks, but still being slightly cooler and more hip than them. I feel that's the vibe they gave. And so it could very well be the case because you're seeing Starbucks crop up everywhere. And more often than not, your Blue Tokai cafe isn't too far away from your Starbucks. So it's an interesting one. Could definitely have played into it. But I also feel it's also the larger trend of people just drinking a lot more coffee. In the north, obviously, chai has always ruled. In the south, it's always been about very milky coffee and like filter coffee, etc. But you're now seeing people kind of drinking a lot of different kinds. But all this, you just go into any of them, you know that people are just drinking frappuccinos and like all that sugary stuff and not staying classic, like getting a good old espresso.
And a follow-on question, what do you think will make sure that Blue Tokai doesn't go the cafe coffee day route? Because CCD was the OG Blue Tokai. You know what I mean? Like CCD back in the day was cool.
They'll have to still kind of stay the cool quotient. CCD became almost like, it was a CCD. It wasn't cool to go sit in a CCD at some point of time. And even if you go to a tier 2 city, you go to, non-metro cities as well, you will notice a mocha there. You will notice, I don't think at some point, Coffee Day just let that vibe of sitting there go away. Which interestingly, Costa Coffee still has, even though it's international, right? I feel a barista actually had that, but could never really and at some point kind of scale up to that level. So as long as Blue Tokai sticks to that, like maintains that genuine appeal and vibe when you go into the cafe, I feel they won't go there. I also feel they have an interesting play because they do sell a large amount of their coffee online as well. They have multiple categories of pieces, but I still feel it's for them, it's going to be how they maintain the cafes.
Yes, queen.
One break and we will come back and talk about Go Mechanic and oh my God. Welcome back to Think Fast, where I'm taking back some words I said a few episodes ago. A few episodes ago, I said, founders need to work with, even if they work with writers, they need to make sure it's authentic and that they have some role to play in the posts they craft. I take it back. Please let ghostwriters write for you, because if you read LinkedIn posts like what the Go Mechanic founder wrote, you would rather give it to somebody else who can write it better. I take my word back. That post was just like, that post was called suicide. That's what the post is called.
So give our listeners a TLDR. I mean, you have to be living under a bus to not know this Go Mechanic news. But what happened and what irked you about his LinkedIn post?
So basically, Go Mechanic, this is a company which has raised millions and millions, about 500 odd million in funding till now. Their basic premise was that basically auto services, like, you're repairing, car washing, etc., is what they were giving. They were aggregating those. So this thing, don't go to your authorized dealer. They'll find local guys here, will aggregate them for you, get a better deal, is what they were pushing for. They grew the company like crazy. And now, but they've been struggling to raise funding for a while. They're Sequoia funded, but they were not able to raise their latest round. And someone who was kind of trying to vet them to invest got EY got Ernst & Young in. And during that probe, they realized that there were a lot of irregularities in just like on their financials, right? The inflated revenue numbers. Many of the garages listed on the platform were fake and fictitious. Sounds like that.
That was wild.
Data lady, we spoke about it earlier. And so all in all this happens. And then their co-founder, Amit Bhasin, writes this long LinkedIn post saying that they made grave errors in judgment as we followed growth at all costs, particularly in regard to financial reporting, which we deeply regret, which is basically you admitting to fraud. Even if you have done fraud, rule number 1, do not admit to you doing fraud till you speak to a lawyer, speak to this one. So he has since then deleted that, edited it, and he's taken the grave word out. But now they're laying off 70% of their workforce, and the rest of them aren't getting paid as well, as far as I know.
Okay, so let me ask you this, right? Would you rather him or Ashneer Grover? Because both of them have been accused of the same thing. One has accepted what he was accused of, and obviously in no way am I saying that Ashneer, committed fraud. That's the allegation or that's the case against him. You have someone kind of taking it on the chin, right? Saying, yeah, okay, and I'm not trivializing the matter. Committing fraud is like bonkers, and his post was ridiculous. But don't you think props have to be given to owning up to shit? Because there are so many people who do so many shady things and never own up to it. And then it just basically becomes like an exercise in, PR savviness.
So here's my thing. Does owning up in this case do anything except you trying to in some point make yourself look less bad? But the problem is, if you write a post like that, you made yourself look worse. So I don't think owning up is the problem. The problem is how you own up to it.
I feel like he owned up to it because he knew it was going to break in the news. You know what I mean? Like it literally seemed like it was written 10 minutes before it went out on one of these.
You got to think this. So no matter what happens, and here's the thing, right? At no point am I saying you don't have to admit to things when you do them wrong. But if you're a company and if you're a large scale organization and you have people who work in their organization, your basic responsibility, even if you have done fraud, when you're communicating it, communicate it using certain stipulations that all companies have to use. Speak to a lawyer, speak to a communications person internally, craft it right. Take it on the chin, but take it on the chin in a dignified, thought-through manner. Don't take it on the chin like you just jumped off like the slide and fell on the sandpit.
Yeah, agree. That I am fully aligned on.
Ashneer, however, would have walked out in his green sports car and said, "Fuck this shit, main kuch nahi kiya."
That is true. That is true. Walked away unscathed. But let me ask you this, right? I feel like it's easy to, obviously shit on someone who committed fraud for all the right reasons. But what do you think forces founders to do absolutely ridiculous shit like this, which will catch on at some point? You know what I mean? Like everything catches on. Is the assumption that you'll walk away unscathed because, I don't imagine Sequoia or Charity or any of their investors going after these guys, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel that you do get, even if it doesn't come out into the public domain, people do know. And as much as we believe the business world is very large, it is still very small. And the thing that spreads the fastest is reputation. If you have a bad reputation as someone who has done this once or done this again, it's tricky for you to get funded the second time, for you to build something else later on. Although people who have done far worse have gotten funded not just twice, but thrice. I mean, Adam Newman just raised, right? That's how. But I feel at some point there is a certain, even if you've done something really off, I feel you owe it to your employees as much as you owe it to your investors that, okay, today this is the state of things. Is you're down 70% of the people, you have 30% of the workforce. Is this post going to make it worse for them to come back from having zero credibility? Or will it just, so I feel that that's what you got to think about. You got to think about, okay, I've done what I've done. Now I got to make sure this company survives for all that's there. And maybe not even for the founder. I think it needs to be something which as an organization you need to have. And see, again, like you said, it's easy to say, tougher to do, but you got to have, which is why everybody says you got to have people in the system who are guardrails to make sure fraud doesn't happen. And as investors, you got to have guardrails in just kind of figuring out how this kind of stuff doesn't happen. It happens too often.
Yeah. On a slightly lighter note, who would have thunk that a SoftBank potential investment would have led to, all of this unraveling?
Exactly.
Right?
Imagine that.
How tides have turned, that a SoftBank diligence led to this little unearthing. And just, cut to like 4 or 5 years ago where SoftBank, quite like Tiger, would cut and write checks in literally anything that was walking planet Earth. So interesting change of events there.
In one more interesting change of events, Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin have been holding many, many meetings in Google. They've been far away chilling and doing whatever they were doing till now. But as ChatGPT and OpenAI have suddenly become talk of the world and they're taking over the crown of poster child of AI, the Google founders are back. Supposedly came back because Sundar Pichai actually requested them to come back. They've been spending a lot more time with the AI teams, running through all the stuff they had ready. Code Red was declared by Mr. Pichai because they're saying that we have to jumpstart a lot more of our AI development, which is kind of going a little slower. They were launching them piece by piece, but this might just make them kind of go all in and push through a lot of the features they might have been developing a lot slower. They're also scaling back their workforce, right? We spoke about that earlier, and that this could be one of the things that's connected to it is the fact that because you're going all in on a specific area, their biggest chunk of money as revenue comes from search advertising. So they don't want to lose that. So all eyes are right now on safeguarding that. Although I think it's surprising considering this has just kind of happened. The world still uses Google, but they're preempting it. So we're going to see some very interesting features come out, I'm sure, on search.
But what do you think is happening? Do you think there's wide-scale consumer adoption of ChatGPT, or is it more the underlying technology is much stronger than what Google has built out?
I feel Google already has a lot of this, but because they do so many different things and they've spread out so wide, they might not have been launched. They actually have a version of a ChatGPT like one, I forget the name, which they've had for a bit. They've tested it out. I don't think it's publicly available, but it's there. So a lot of these exist. I feel they haven't rolled them out the way they should. And now it's a push to kind of do that too, because you don't want to lose that. Look at a Meta and a Facebook, right? At some point, kind of the poster child of this is what social media needs to be like, etc. And that's kind of gone away. I feel Google doesn't want that sheen to go away from them of having really been at the top of cutting edge of AI, and they want to make sure that's there. I feel that could have played a big part. Let's not lose that. We already have this stuff in the making. We have it. We just haven't launched it. Let's just go out there and ChatGPT ko thoda thappad maar ke aate hain.
Yes, just like Shah Rukh Khan in Pathan.
But interestingly, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he actually tweeted where he said Google, he tweeted saying that Google executives were saying that companies' reputation could suffer if it moves too fast on chat technology, but they're recalibrating and like reducing the level of risk for it, saying it's disappointing to see this 6-week development. OpenAI will continually decrease the level of risk we are comfortable taking with new models. So basically, he's saying these guys might not be following enough risk assessment, and this might be bad, versus what everybody should follow is really carefully look at risk. I mean, it's the statement's right, but this is just now this is going to be like a Pepsi versus Coke scenario.
But let me ask you this: is a challenge ChatGPT / OpenAI, or is it that Microsoft is going in? I feel like it's the latter. Like I feel like it's, dude. I don't think OpenAI itself right now is that much of a threat.
They wouldn't have stressed as much if they wouldn't have stressed as much if
wasn't. Yeah.
And secondly, now that you say that, one of the most interesting things is that the one area that Google has been able to grow is B2B, right? Their cloud solutions have not done well as a category. And now Microsoft obviously rules that whole piece. And if they kind of bring this in there, the offering becomes a lot stronger. So I guess that would also have been a thing, is that they're going to know that's an area which they don't have any headway on, and they wanted to focus on that. But now this kind of happening, the Microsoft thing actually could have played a large part in it as well, because it's the Pichai versus the Nadella.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And with that, it's an episode. Sorry, guys, I've been very distracted. Too much work this week. So
we will take a break, but we have recommendations. We'll take a short break, come back. Yay. It's our recommendations for the week. Welcome back to Think Fast, where it's time for recommendations. What is your recommendation from Jaipur Lit Fest?
Oh my God, so many recommendations. One, guys, please attend JLF. It's just like, it's so much fun for people who are just willing to be randomly curious. Like I, walked into author sort of, conversations whose work I wasn't familiar with at all. And I think sometimes those end up really being the best. Like, for example, I already mentioned the intro, but Amia Srinivasan, what a brilliant speaker, so thoughtful about, all things feminist movement. She has this book out called The Right to Sex, which I bought. Another book that I bought, which I will read, is The Song of the Cell by Siddharth Mukherjee. Obsessed with him, love his writing. But my actual recommendation, if you've heard me till now, is this book that I've kicked off reading. It's called Hitmakers, The Science of Popularity in an Age of Distraction by Derek Thompson. Into the first 2 odd chapters, and this book is just a goldmine if you love all things marketing. So if you're a marketing geek, check out my recommendation. And if you generally want good literature, then, read the 2 books that I suggested before, Hitmakers.
What is my recommendation? My recommendation actually is, did I recommend Last of Us last week?
I don't know. I don't keep a track of your recommendations. If I didn't,
I'm really recommending it. If you haven't seen Last of Us, episode 2 came out today. But, you're generally worried when a great game is converted into a TV series or a movie. But episode 1 was just fabulous. It is like one of the most outstanding first episodes I've seen in such a long time. Even if you haven't played the game. And I played half the game. And episode 2 dropped, which I have to watch, right? I thought I'll watch it after this recording, but I maybe not. It's a little late in the night to watch post-apocalyptic movies, but series rather. But I highly recommend it. And that title track, which is the same track which is in the game, is so good. Like, it's the best track.
Wah Taj. And with that, it's an episode. We're done.
Yes. Kya baat hai. Kya recording kiya, kya baat kiya. It's time to go put my throat in some ginger.
Do that, Varun. Do that. And I will go to sleep.
Okay. Toodles, my poodles.
Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in.